Hey, can everybody hear these mics? I think they can hear us. You're breathtaking! Guys, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the world of Destiny's lore. This panel is the third of its iteration. This is amazing this year because we're actually joined on stage not by just our wonderful community members, but also by a member of Bungie's narrative team themselves. So guys, let's get a big warm welcome to the panel.
Thank you very much.
Going all the way from left to right, we have BlueCrew86 of Focus Fire Chat. The wonderful Myeling Games.
Number one, baby!
We have the wonderful Jonathan Toe of Bungie. We have grneyedmusiklvr, also of Focus Fire Chat. And last but not least, we have Baxter of ishtarcollective.net. I also want to go ahead and extend a really quick thank you to everybody who assisted us with creating this panel. There are a few people behind the scenes who really did assist us. These are people like Purple Chimera, these are people like Anon Pig, people like Beard Grizzly. Without you guys, we would not have been able to make this panel happen. So big thanks to those of us who are not necessarily on the stage, but most certainly made this happen. And also Rhino, whose name I just forgot, and I'm so sorry. Always get something wrong, always something. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to start this year, and we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit with Jonathan Toe, and we're going to open up a little bit more to audience discussion and questions later. But we're actually going to go ahead and start talking about what Jonathan has done with regards to the work at Bungie. So Jonathan, if I'm not mistaken, you did a lot of the work with regards to Shaxx and Luna's Howl.
Yeah, I'm still the primary writer on Shaxx after I kind of inherited the character from vanilla D1. I've been writing for Destiny for the last 4.5 years. I started on House of Wolves and most recently helped ship Season of the Drifter and Season of Opulence. Thanks for having me, and thanks for playing.
Awesome. Can I ask a question already? Can I ask a question already to John?
You can absolutely ask a question.
So you said you inherited Shaxx. Like, what's the process of inheriting someone else's character and then having to work with that?
It's just called working in the games industry on a live game. My first assignment coming into Destiny was on PvP and on the Strikes team. And I saw what Shaxx was. I played D1 like a fan, just like a fan out in the world. And when I got the assignment, I read up on Lenny James, his voice actor, watched a bunch of his movies, you know, Snatch being one of the big ones, and I thought that, you know, we weren't leveraging Lenny's Shakespearean training and projection as much as we could, and so one of the first acts I took on Taken King was to fully leverage that. And he became, you know, a couple of years later, he became the space dad that we all know.
So that's where some of our favorite lines originate from, because again, it was around Taken King that Shaxx started to get, not that he had no character in the first place, but much more character, you know, it's...
Absolutely.
I'm trying to remember what the line is for We Ran Out of Medals in Destiny 1. It's something along the lines of, You are magnificent. Yeah. You continue to be my greatest success, Guardian.
Lenny James will turn a 50-cent line into $1. The guy he's very good. He's very good at what he does, and he's also I don't believe he knows very much about Destiny to this day, right? And despite that, is able to give like a resounding performance, right? Like the one line that he has been able to quote was from Crimson Days. We had Shaxx quoting some Shakespeare lines, which Lenny does know. So those have been to date the only lines that Lenny has been able to quote outside of the booth for Shaxx.
That's perfect. And on top of that, you were also instrumental with not just the lore of Shaxx himself, but also the lore of everything surrounding Shaxx, and that includes things such as the pinnacle weapons. In particular, I think Luna's Howl is one that's worth highlighting. Could you describe to us, just a little bit more about what's it like taking a well-known character, taking the lore surrounding them, and then being like, okay, how do we make that into a lore tab specifically? Like, is there a specific flowchart that you could give A to B?
Luna's House specifically just felt like a very universal story that we could tell. I mean, everyone's lost a pet or knows someone who does, and has met people who've been really affected by that. In terms of lore in general, and the creation of that for a game like Destiny, all of the writers we look at when we start. We look at the player experience first, and Shaxx wasn't born kind of whole cloth the way he was on paper or anything like that. He kind of came out of we knew we were writing a character who would be an announcer for the Crucible, which is a arena-based PvP mode, and that is naturally going to necessitate short lines, concise speech. And additionally, it's hard to talk about Shaxx without talking about announcing in general for Destiny. We realized after Vanilla D1 that Shaxx was a bit harsh, right? And so all of the announcers since then, the ones that I've done, we have ensured when you are losing a match, not only does the character sort of not berate you for it, they support you and they try to get you to keep playing. In other words, we don't want you leaving the Crucible because of the dialogue, and on the flip side, we really want to put you on a pedestal and celebrate you as hard as you do, if not harder, right? When you kill 20 people, pull their spines out of their necks, and leap off of the couch, right? Shaxx is in those moments. I picture him. He's tearing his own couch apart. His buttons are flying off of his shirt. He's that excited. All that's to say, the context informed what Shaxx became. And there's a lot of cool lore for Shaxx, a lot of which I ended up detailing for the Grimoire, Shaxx and his Red Jack frames that helped to capture Crucible arenas across the system, taking that territory back from the enemies of humanity. And that stuff's cool, but it's all kind of born out of, we're trying to give you guys context for PvP in Destiny, giving you a reason to play it beyond just the pure competition of it. And so it all comes back to just player experience, helping to define the character.
And I think it's fair to say you guys have done a pretty good job at that thus far. And I know that the less harsh Crucible lines are most certainly appreciated by myself. I remember at one point, there's that moment in the Crucible where Shaxx just really suddenly snaps and goes, "Fight back! Control the zones!"
It's one of the ones that if it's not entirely gone, we've lowered the frequency with which it appears. And it's to expand on that a little bit. I think the Drifter is also a really good example of taking player experience first. And there's kind of a funny story with how Drifter developed. He in terms of the gameplay side, in terms of the player experience side, by the time I rolled onto Gambit, the designers had already known that they wanted to use the Taken as the central combatant for this new game mode, this new PvE VP mode. And no matter what else we were dropping into the field with you, Cabal, Vex, Scorn, the Taken would be there, and they would be at the center of the map, near the bank. We knew the Taken would be the guys that would pop out whenever you fed the bank moats. And as a result of that, Drifter as a character didn't exist at that point. But I figured we've got all this momentum going on the design side for the Taken. This character's got to have some kind of a link to the Taken. And then additionally, from on high, we kind of got the suggestion that we should try to tie Gambit with one of our really popular lore stories, The Last Word and Thorn. This made me very nervous, personally, because it's, as you guys know, Last Word and Thorn is it's John Goff's baby, and John Goff still is an external writer for us, but he's no longer in the building, no longer sort of able to be right there to help shepherd the original intent. And so I felt the need to give him professional courtesy to do that story justice, right? What I did not want happening was to have either Shin Malphur or Dredge and Yor be the Gambit vendor, because that knowing what Gambit was, there wouldn't be the runway to do either of those characters justice. Like, I think you really need that to be something with a lot more spectacle backing it. And so we ended up, I looked at the Gambit's release vehicle, which was Forsaken, and as you guys know, it was kind of a darker story than we had told before. It's you are trying to avenge Cade's death, going after his murderer, and it's sort of a Western setting. And this character, Drifter, would have to fit into that world, right? So that helped us come up with that, combined with our kind of announcer rules, right? We wanted this guy to be charming. We wanted him to not make you go away from playing Gambit, and we wanted him to entice you to play Gambit. So we came up with kind of this snake oil salesman, this like a used car salesman, who he's very for you succeeding in Gambit, because the more Motes of Dark you bring him, the more profit he gets, the more Taken he can control, right? And so it's another example of how, even though Shax is a good guy, Drifter is definitely not. Like, once Gambit closes up, there is a very good chance he'll stab you in the back for a blue engram, right? For a blue, he'd kill you for a blue. But yeah, and so that's just a really, really long-winded way of saying, like, writing in Destiny is a huge collaboration between a bunch of different stakeholders and disciplines, and we still somehow manage to come out with stuff that's pretty cool.
You mentioned that when they already had the Taken sort of idea there, and you had to design the Drifter around that. Absolutely. How often is it that you might bring a character, and then is it always parallel like that? Is there already like things you have to sort of adhere to, or is it a little bit back and forth?
It kind of depends on the idea, and there's a future release after Shadowkeep that I can't talk about yet, where the pitch did come directly from me, but it kind of, the stars had to align for that, and we were just ready to fire on those cylinders.
Yeah, so one of the things that you just mentioned is a really interesting point about how you have all of these different writers trying to collaborate together.
Absolutely.
And there's some really important connections there. How do the writers of Destiny collaborate? How do they work together to have a kind of a cohesive lore story?
There's a lot of sheer force of will, not much sleeping. Seth Dickinson just sent me a lore book to take a look at and give feedback on, like this weekend, right? And neither of us are sleeping very much. It takes diligence, and we are kind of our own gatekeepers for what makes sense, right? And a lot of a part of our jobs is to try to help design and art create stuff that is cool based on their craft expertise, but then is also fits into the lore, and so you guys hopefully are not unhappy, right?
Yeah.
Kind of going off of that, how do you guys decide what goes into the lore books, or what goes into a lore tab in comparison?
I think oftentimes it's the best story that we could tell, given the player experience, given the kind of gameplay that we were trying to do. So I mentioned Drifter before. There was that desire to kind of have him orbit the Last Word and Thorn story. So I made him the most minor Shadow of Yor that I possibly could, because I still wanted Drifter to be his own man. Right,
Dredge and Hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And despite I think his Gambit dialogue, trying to really set you up for him being this cool, charming, roguish guy, he's not really meant to be an aspirational figure at all. So he is tied to Last Word and Thorn. He rides the line between light and dark, which is another. It's a theme meant to mirror Forsaken, which was something that we talked about a lot in Forsaken. But yeah, I wanted him to be his own man, so I wrote a lore book for him called Man with No Name that just has him. it turns out Drifter is just a Dark Age coward, right? Like
No.
he's just a guy trying to get by. He's just trying to get
Puts
by,
the
right?
moves on Aphrodite.
I think it's a very natural thing. I would run from my ghost if I were resurrected by a ghost, right? Anyway, yeah, I wanted to tell a human story with Drifter.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
I think
hopefully that answered the question.
I think you really succeeded there. I think, a lot of the characters in Destiny are kind of, they're aspirational, but I do feel as though the Drifter is really human.
For sure.
You see his flaws, and you see that he's done what he's done in order to survive and in order to,
That's
just
half his charm.
Yeah.
If he didn't
Yeah.
have flaws, I mean, I love Drifter.
Yeah.
I think he's a good guy.
I'm sure he appreciates that.
We all know what you chose in the Allegiance quest.
She doesn't hide that from
Can
anybody.
we see a show of hands to see allegiances?
Fellow snitches, put them up. Wow. And Dredgens.
Damn.
I think there are actually more Dredgens. Wow. Yeah.
Well, and actually, on that note, like the types of techniques that we've seen with Destiny is, it's all over the place as far as storytelling. So you have like the Allegiance quest, you have the pilgrimages in the Dreaming City, the relationship that we got with Ada 1. All of those have really kind of have their own distinct flavor. Can you kind of expand on what that has taught you guys as writers?
What you're pointing out there, like the differences in tone across the releases, it's kind of due to the structure of the way seasons worked, and I'm not entirely sure if that's the way they will continue to work. Each of those, like season of or the Black Armory and season of the Drifter, season of Opulence, had sort of leapfrogging creative leadership, and so there were kind of different goals for each, and some of that stuff, like the Allegiance quest, which was headed up by Mallory Schleif, and it's the favorite, my favorite thing that I've ever contributed to in Destiny. It's because it's so simple. It's like she put a mud into Destiny, like with the when you go to Spider and there are those things that you can't buy, like the ghost trapped in the cage.
Right, yeah.
Which I mean, and she was able to evoke genuine emotion out of like strings and an icon, right? Like you had people from Japan like posting about it on Twitter that they would really like to save that ghost, please. But of course they can't. And the Allegiance quest was and I've got questions for you guys too. Like, did you like the Allegiance quest?
Yeah.
It was meant as experimentation, meant to kind of prove what we could try to do when pushing, actually encouraging you guys to like role play. And it was down to even the narrative previews that we wrote leading up to that release was meant to bait you guys and goad you guys into conversation with each other about, who was right, who was wrong, Anor's a real asshole, and
Yes.
yes. Despite I think being right.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion.
I mean, I'll kind of weigh in on that. I know that Green and I have talked about this on our podcast.
lot.
We've talked about it a lot because the nice thing is that it actually made us part of the game. Like our decision actually did change what was going on, and I think that was really for me. I love RPGs, and so for me that was like, okay, finally something actually changed what was being said.
Absolutely, yeah, and when I write for Destiny, I try to take I try to be y'all's GM as much as I can, and the good version of that, right? Where I'm not necessarily parading my own characters in front of yours to save the day or anything like that. But I think the more that we can acknowledge players having an impact on the world, like the better it is. That's why you play games, right? There's a layer of interactivity there that is separate from the lore and gives it its own story. It's your story, essentially.
Absolutely. And I think I want to go ahead and just assume something from the room, but you guys can cheer if this is correct. I want to say that the things that you guys have been experimenting with in Destiny's narrative, from everything in Forsaken, such as lore cards, to small touches in the Black Armory, such as the camera focusing and centering on Ada 1 when she tells her dialogue, to loads of the stuff in the Season of the Drifter when we're looking at the Allegiance quest and the Imitations of the Nine, if those were all I don't want to say experiments because it almost sounds like it's something concocted in the lab, but if those were all better attempts at telling the story of Destiny, I want to say that's a resounding success. So, what do you guys think?
Thanks for that feedback. Thank you. I'll take that back to the base.
Yes.
All right. So, guys, we want to go ahead and open this up to questions from the floor in just a minute, but we actually posted a Reddit thread, thanks to good Sir Baxter from Ishtar Collective, who organized all this, and we actually got a few curated questions to go ahead and start us off, and it's an interesting discussion that we're all going to go ahead and just jump into, really. 3 questions only for this. It's going to be nice and quick. But yeah, the first of these questions comes from Vertigo, and he asks as follows, or they ask as follows: does the panel think there is still a need for the Vanguard after witnessing their personal crises during the Red War, the lack of cooperation after Cade Six's death, and their general inactivity in recent seasons? It seems to me that Guardians such as Eris Morn and Osiris are more appropriate role models to us now, as they take on the city's greatest threats personally and head on. Thank you, Vertigo. But I'm going to open that up to everybody. Let's start with Jonathan real quick.
Yeah, so I think what they're picking up on there is kind of an unfortunate side effect of actually audio budgeting for the seasons, for each season. We're only able to bring in a couple of actors to field our characters per season, which is why you have things like Ada One being the primary like sole character for Black Armory, with not very many other characters to play off of, right? And we really scrambled for that in Season of the Drifter, actually, because it's difficult to show you who a character is without them kind of interacting with other people, right? And that's part of the reason why we created Outnor, like knowing that we wouldn't get the budget to show her on screen, but it was necessary to have the Vanguard, let the Vanguard have a representative who also wasn't them, so that the character could kind of branch off and make her own decisions with some agency. It's not that I think all of the writers would say that the Vanguard are as important as they ever were. We're just not being given the opportunity because of technical reasons, like budgetary reasons, to go back to them, because we are only able to make a big release like Destiny 2 every once in a while.
I think when we talk about the Vanguard is not necessarily whether we need them or not, but whether Ikora and Zavala want to continue. There's a couple cards where they're questioning whether they can still be Vanguard and can they be helpful to the city and the tower and new Guardians. And I think we're getting to that point to explore, does there need to be a change in Vanguard? Is there a change coming?
Well, it's an interesting way to adjust. I mean, with budgeting issues and whatnot, and having to balance everything out, you put into the lore itself, hey, we hear that you guys are like, hey, Zavala and Ikora are kind of getting pushed back a little bit as not necessarily the core leadership. Our characters growing and stepping up and doing things with other NPCs. And so you guys put in there that Ikora is questioning, we were not meant to be the heads of everybody.
Absolutely.
That's not what we were there for. And it's interesting that you put that in there to help explain, hey, there's not necessarily a budgeting reason. Like, I'm not going to tell you, hey, I can't make Zavala and Ikora the main thing because, hey, we have budgeting issues. You're not going to put that in lore. But you did it in a creative way that lets us know that they're developing as characters as well.
Well, thanks for appreciating that. Yeah, for sure.
If I might say as well, I think that the way the sentiment around those characters has been developed is also kind of what's being read into by Vertigo here. Because if you take a look at the characters themselves and what everybody thinks of the Vanguard, especially during the Season of the Drifter and during Forsaken's main release, there was a lot of kind of just, especially after Zavala says, no, we can't pursue Ultron into the Tangled Shore, and our Guardian speaks again for the first time in 5 years or so. That, I think, for players is a resounding moment where they say, yeah, that's how I feel. And that is exactly what's going through players' mind when they get to the Season of the Drifter. It's this thing.
But it wasn't how all of us felt.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, here's the thing is so I hear that and I agree with that, but I would also say that was actually why the Allegiance quest was so powerful for me, was because throughout the entire Forsaken campaign, I actually didn't like our Guardian being kind of shoehorned into, oh, we're going to take revenge. I was like, do we need to? But the thing is there was no choice. Yeah.
I think
It's-
you've woken the
Yeah,
hive on
I
that.
know. Yeah, see, there's these things called consequences.
It's fair.
No,
His
there's these
opinions are
things
valid.
called
It's all good.
consequences when you break the rules, and that's what Cade and Sundance learned. But the thing is like the entire ending of the campaign, right? I did appreciate that it faded to black because that does leave open the debate who fired the shot.
Right.
And so, yep, see that.
Right.
But I mean, so I think that was also kind of the cool thing there as well.
And it's perfect in a sense, because Forsaken, no matter what side you end up taking, whether you like the pursuit of Aldrin or whether you kind of think it's morally ambiguous, the moral ambiguity of it is what really shines through at the end. You sit there and you say, you know, this was breaking the rules, and even if I think it was justified, the rules were still there, and they were maybe there for a good reason. Even so, wonderful discussion. We have our next question from a user known as White. And they ask, do you think that a Elixni could ever be resurrected by a ghost? I mean, it happened with Aldrin, so why not the Elixni? So what do you guys think? Is there any commentary on the idea of a fallen Guardian?
I mean, they're...
Please. Don't give anything away.
The Fallen did have a whirlwind. The whirlwind happened. Yeah, and the Traveler supposedly left them. I think it's open to interpretation.
Isn't there the one
I mean, there was, yeah.
There are no promises there. No promises.
You did kind of have that one card, though, that hints at
Savin.
it a little bit.
Savin, yeah.
Where the ghost kind of freaks out a little bit because he scans it and there's a Fallen there, but it's behind the Fallen. You get the actual Guardian, and it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So close.
No comment.
No promises. Our final question from the curated bunch comes from Mart. Again, we're touching on a lot of Forsaken topics here. This last one is, what are your expectations for Aldrin's further character development? I'm actually gonna go ahead and throw this down the table to Green first, if that's okay.
Where do I want Aldrin to go?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and just get a...
I'm gonna turn the mic off.
I would love to see the conflict develop with not just our Guardian, because so many Guardians have still a vendetta against Aldrin, but also develop the fact that, hey, as a Guardian, does he have any memories of his former? If he does, or if he's taught by Mara, if Mara is the one who grabbed him out of that scene or whatnot, or where is he now? Like, is he off running on doing his own thing? Is he going to be, quote unquote, just a random person who shows up at the tower that we're like, wait, I know you?
And everyone stares at him rather awkwardly.
I'd like to kind of see...
Listen, you need to be nice to pulled pork, okay?
I would like to see how our Guardians now would react to Aldrin seeing him face to face. Not necessarily like Aldrin having this grand scheme of things, but have kind of the inner conflict, because there was that moment with Cade and Aldrin and Petra and everybody, and it's just like heart-wrenching for all of us. I cried. I will fully admit that. And I want to see our character kind of struggle with it a little bit. I think it would be interesting to develop emotionally that way.
This is how I imagine.
Wait, there you go.
This is how I imagine the reaction to Aldrin coming back. It's a bit like Jon Snow in Game of Thrones.
Oh, no.
Everyone lines up, and he's tied in the tower, and you have an emote to like punch, and then like, right, everyone lines up, give him a good old crack, and then you move on. Then everything's forgiven. He can resurrect, and then we start over.
Just line up, stab, line up, stab, line up, stab. Yeah, we'll go to Baxter, and then we'll finish off with John, and then we'll go to audience questions on that one. So what do you think, Baxter? What are your expectations for Aldrin's further character development?
What are my expectations? I don't know. I mean, it's the points that Green made as well, you know, like I do want to see, I do think that the person that was resurrected is not Aldrin. And I actually hope, you know, I hope that he picks a new name, you know, I hope that he kind of not necessarily intentionally, but distances himself from the person that he was. because I think that makes things more interesting. That gives you this, you can, are you a result of your
Past.
Yeah, are you a result of your past? Nature, virtue, nurture. Are you intrinsically a certain person, or do your experiences lead you to be a certain person?
And that's been something we've debated as lore masters this entire time.
I mean, if you look at Uldren's history, from his what was the name of the ship that he was on with Mara? That was
The Queen's ship?
No.
Yang Li
before.
Wei, Exeter Screen.
From that point, that they were a family that went away on this journey, and then like all of that history, that is why Uldren is the way that I would say. That is why Uldren is the way that he is. He has this massive set of experiences, like more than anybody alive today could possibly comprehend. And, he has all of these biases about the journey of the Awoken back to the solar system, and the way that the Traveler reacted, and,
It's always been about his sister.
Yeah, it has,
He's always tried to take care of his sister in whatever way it means, or at least get his sister's attention.
Yeah.
Because it's almost as if Uldren is that little brother that just doesn't ever get seen.
Yeah. And I think that's, giving somebody a fresh start and not having all of that history, not having all of those memories, what kind of person would they become?
Right.
And I guess I wouldn't necessarily say that's an expectation. That's something that I hope that we get to see. But, at the same time, it's unusual to have a Bungie writer involved in these discussions. So
these are all great questions. Great ideas. We should think very hard about it.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. For the record, I want it to be known that I actually stand with Baxter on this one. I don't think it's right to call Uldren anymore. But yeah. Right, so guys, we are going to go ahead and briefly open it up to audience questions from the floor. If you guys would like to form an orderly line in front of the microphone, keep in mind as well, this is a very quick Q&A. The first 8 of you will be receiving very, very special treats. I think if Purple there is going to be able to hand you something. Also, keep this in mind. Ooh.
Nope. Keep talking.
Blue's going to go ahead and grab some stuff. Keep in mind as well, this is a lightning round-esque Q&A, so short questions are more likely to be answered. You can address them to anyone on the panel or everyone, but long questions and long queries about things generally, theories, anything like that is less likely to be answered. So tailor your questions appropriately. All right.
All right, this question is for John, mainly. You mentioned earlier that you talked to Seth Dickinson like last weekend. Obviously,
yesterday actually.
Okay.
He sent me an email. Yes.
Obviously, he's pretty important with, a big chunk of Destiny lore. He's a tremendous writer, and I was just wondering, because you've mentioned him so recently, I've talked to him so recently, what kind of influence or input does he have going into the future with Shadowkeep and beyond? Like, is he still referenced highly, and is he still something that you're going back and forth with current Destiny lore?
Yeah, he has been regularly writing lore for us, and that's a great question. He's going to be writing the collector's edition booklet for Shadowkeep.
That's awesome.
So get that.
That's awesome.
If you're a Seth fan, you should. We have an ongoing relationship with Seth. Yeah, he's still helping us out.
Awesome. Thank you.
I should mention as well that Seth actually submitted a question.
Oh,
He
Seth
did,
submitted
he
a question.
did.
Let me see if I can find that.
Okay.
And his question was, will you tell John that Seth says hi?
I appreciate that. I'll get to his email. I need to read that. He's on to something good. And actually, do we have time to give some writer shout-outs?
Absolutely, go for it.
Certainly.
So on and Destiny, we don't get that opportunity all that often, and I can't quote. I can't mention everybody, but just kind of within the last year of development, the team has changed since then. But while I've got you all here, so Jason Harris and Jill Shar, you have them to thank for the Forsaken campaign. Jill wrote the flavor text on a lot of your favorite guns since House of Wolves. She also was the main architect behind Cade's backstory in Forsaken that everyone cries about. And Mallory Schleif was the primary narrative architect on the Dreaming City. She did a lot of the current Mara work, and as well as Orin, who's the emissary of the Nine. Christine Thompson, who recently left us, is the best narrative lead that I've ever had at the company, and she had her hands in everything that we released in Season of the Drifter and Season of Opulence. John Goff and Seth Dickinson, you guys are already intimately familiar with. They continue to be pillars of narrative in Destiny. We have a relatively new external writer, Christine Faraday, who wrote something that you guys all seem to like, the Chronicon. Mm-hmm. And she was also the one who concepted the idea of the Scion fan fiction, where I don't know why it's those are truths. They are absolutes. And Jill Shar was the one to actually implement them and execute on them in the form of lore tabs. And actually, there's a funny story. Jill's last assignment on Destiny was to write those cards. So the last thing she did was murder all of our characters.
Yeah.
That's fun.
So thanks, Jill, you crazy bastard.
Can we get a big hand for all those writers?
Adam Miller and Guillaume Colombe brought us Black Armory, and they will be they're bringing us Shadowkeep as well, along with Aaron Lindy, our new writer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Oh.
Oh.
Okay. There we go. 2 quick questions. What other names did you have for pulled pork, and how did that become the name? And what is the story behind the "I made you this" medal line?
I made this. I can speak more to that. That was actually the brainchild of Andrew Weldon, the designer that I work with on the Crucible, and Andrew's great at what he does. It was his idea down to having Shax crudely draw you a medal because he'd run out.
Also, who drew the medal?
On his last legs, he had nothing. Pulled pork was it's actually Mallory Schleif's brainchild, and she'd be able to speak better to his origins. I just think that that character is a great piece of video game writing.
He's adorable.
Yeah.
He's adorable.
The voice of that character, I keep getting it stuck in my head. It's Lucas the Spider thing. That's all I think of for the voice of that ghost is Lucas the Spider.
I perhaps she'd agree with you. I'm not sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So coming off the lore with Forsaken for the Awoken and then the humans, we're the past of the humans. Is there any plans on expanding the Exo lore? Because with Cade's Ace of Spades story, it's sort of the Deepstone Crypt, how his message to Petra is the crypts on Enceladus, correct?
Enchilada.
So
Not
Is there any,
enchilada. You are so bad at names.
Is there any plans on expanding that lore in the future seasons? Maybe a full season dedicated to Exos?
I would love to. I would love to.
if I might briefly speak to this, I feel as though that's a slight misconception because it's 2 separate lines of dialogue, and it's a misconception that even I myself have fed. So I would go ahead and keep those 2 separate in your mind for the moment. And I would also like to go ahead and point out something really important, which is that a lot of this stuff has either been touched and there are plans for it internally, or it's not been written yet. So this is just another one of those reminders, guys. Check preconceptions, keep your mind open. The most important thing you can do is embrace the stories when they come. Thank you, though.
I've been wondering, does the story team ever have any hand in choosing the voice actors for characters if they do have them? Because I feel like Todd Haberkorn being the Drifter was kind of a collaborated effort, given one, that Drifter looks like him, and two, that Todd has such a specific tone in his voice, depending on the character he plays.
When Todd's sides came back for the first batches of sample dialogue for the Drifter, I needed to have him on board, and I pushed for that as hard as I could, and we did get him casted. The writers do have some influence over the casting, and even so after hearing Todd read the first batch of sample lines, I went back and I rewrote a bunch of stuff like to his voice, because that's something that you end up doing anyway, like over the course of time. Like Lenny has affected Shax as much and in the same way. Yeah. You get an ear for like what those actors can do, and it changes your dialogue in a really good way.
I've got a question for John. What is your decision making for deciding what lore to cover on the Crucible Pinnacle weapons, and how come there is none on the Revoker, if you don't mind me asking?
It was a bandwidth issue, just running out of time for that one specifically. We do what we can for those. We have a limited number of writers on each season, and for that, in that particular instant, it just slipped through the cracks. But we'll endeavor to do better next time.
All right, no, you're fine. Thank you.
Awesome.
So, John, I have. We're coming right out of 4th of July here, so I have a patriotic question. On the moon, all the Chinese bases were destroyed. If NASA made them, would they still be here?
Well,
thank you.
I think that's a little scary to answer, to be honest.
The moon would still be haunted.
Yes. All right then. Moon's haunted.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you. I think.
Good answer. Hello. Oh. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep.
All right. So I have a Shax question.
For sure.
So, what was the inspiration, or at least the process, of writing Shax and Mara?
So what I think about as the centerpiece for that lore piece is actually, so we mentioned the wishing wall and the use of it there, and we talked earlier about like collaboration on the team and how the wishing wall started out like as something from design. Like we literally called it Game Genie internally, and it was going to be something that it was always going to be something that would allow you to mess with the Last Wish encounters in some way, and that became when I saw the spec for it, I actually thought this was, and we knew that we didn't necessarily know that the Ahamkara would be involved with Last Wish, but we knew there'd be a giant monster at the end as a boss that you would fight. And when I saw the Game Genie, I thought that it was like the perfect excuse to add the Ahamkara here. Like it's cheat codes. Wishes are cheat codes for reality, right? Like, and I saw an opportunity there too to like add a little bit more to Mara's character in terms of like a way for her to sidestep Riven's attempts to mess with her when Mara would wish, right? Like there's a lot of space, a lot of subtext between words that in Ahamkara can kind of influence and get something more for them out of the bargain, right? But when you distill words to just images and iconography, you get a little bit more specific, right? And you can kind of contain the damage that wishing to an Ahamkara can do. And all of that came out of just the raid team wanted to do a Game Genie for a raid, right? That's what I take out of that card. I'm very proud of that card.
That's a very good answer.
It has
That's a
been
great
a
answer.
very contentious card within the community.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
If I might
right.
as well, I'd like to say that I am personally one of those people who sits there and says it's actually Mara and Xia who we should be looking at.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody looks at the Shax stuff, but let me tell you, if you read the Mara Senna, there's some really sentimental stuff in there. Go ahead and read it, guys. It's a fantastic lore book.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
First off, I want to start this by saying thank you to Byf. When I first moved up here to Orlando, my clan broke apart, and I was so deep into the lore. It's always good to stumble across a YouTube channel of somebody who had the same love and passion for the Destiny lore that I did, and somebody who could listen to me and to learn about the depression struggles and stuff you went through a little while ago. That was more so to connect with me for. But say to you guys, the Drifter is completely a really good role model. I mean, compared to Zavala. I mean, as a Titan, I have to say, Drifter was the more relatable guy, but it relates to that. But when you guys give us the Lumina quest, why did you give us yours Thorn but not let us use it? I mean, it was the Thorn. It wasn't just one of our Weapons of Sorrow replicas, it was yours Thorn.
Would you want to use an actual Guardian killer, though?
Yes.
The implication.
Yes.
No, permadeath everybody
That's a
in
great question.
you want a Crucible? I'm a Dredgen and I don't even want to touch that.
There's a certain bald blue Titan that I think needs to meet that Thorn.
Wow.
If I might say, I think it's one of these points at which it's a point to look to Lumina. I've not read too much of the lore around it because I literally arrived on the first and then it released on the second. But if you are looking for something more powerful, I would recommend taking a look towards that. After all, what is more powerful than taking something that has fallen and then lifting it up? Also,
Yes.
do you mind if I give you a hug real quick?
Yes. I mean, can I get a photo of it too?
Let it be known that you will always have friends in the Destiny community, just saying. Everyone is welcome.
Hi, thank you for all you guys do. It makes 8 hours on an assembly line go way by way faster.
Thank you for playing.
This is more of a question for the panel more than for you, because I understand that you probably couldn't answer this question. I've been seeing a lot going around that maybe Shadowkeep is going to be focusing on the Hive. I personally don't think that could be it. I think, what if this is just the tip of the spear for the darkness actually arriving sooner than we thought?
Okay, so I think we should preface this. We should preface this by saying that anything stated on this panel by very much at least the members of the community is definitely not to be taken as canon. It's nothing more than speculation.
Yes.
Having said that, if we look at the trailer, my opening bit of speculation for you is, quote, "The darkness is closer than you think." So maybe let's pass it down.
I think what's obvious with the writing now, remember we went through a period where we weren't mentioning the darkness. There was a time where that was removed from Destiny 2, and we're really going back to that word now, and it's being used a lot in the Grimoire card or in the lore tab. So I think we are reaching that pinnacle. I don't know if it's going to be in Shadowkeep, but we've got the pyramid ships on the way. If you read Callus's lore, it talks about powers beyond the darkness or something similar to that. I would love for it to be in Shadowkeep, but we'll have to wait and see, I guess.
There's definitely some So there's this concept art. Maybe I shouldn't even mention this, but there's this concept art that's really old that actually a non-pig will never shut up about, which is these 5 concepts for different races.
Yeah.
And there is some similarities between 4 of them and the races that we have encountered in the game so far. Whereas the 5th one, there isn't really anything quite like it in the game, and there is there are some images from the trailer for Shadowkeep that remind me of that concept art. And I don't know, my hope is that they will be connected, but maybe, as you know, somebody, I think by somebody was saying, maybe it was Matt, I've forgotten now, it was only 2 minutes ago. It's just the tip of the iceberg, you know, like maybe this is just, like, we know that the pyramids are on their way. We know that there's something that Callus has seen. Maybe this is just like, these are the scouts. These are the people who are coming ahead of the fleet to kind of say, you know, right, what are these guardians? Because we are kind of, relative to them, we are new. We are something different. That's my...
I have something completely different than everybody so far. We have the wonderful Morla here, Eris Morn, great voice actress. And in the trailer, there's a mention of nightmares and the concept of having kind of our old enemies come back and get us. It's our own nightmares coming back to get us. We talk about Crota and the sword and him randomly glitching and coming back into the back room. He's back. And some of the others are back as well. So it's just like, okay, these nightmares, what if the darkness that we encounter within Shadowkeep itself is not the darkness of a new enemy race, obviously, but our own worst fears made light, coming back to get us. And it's our own inner fears that are playing against us in our own mind, and that we go into our own mind escape.
But what if it's both?
But what if it's everything?
And that's right. But that's the thing is, like, they've also, I mean, and I'm gonna pretend like John's not there.
Yeah,
so
that's what I think.
They've also really stressed on the whole thing about it being psychological.
Yes.
Like within the Vidocs, they've mentioned that repeatedly, along with the concept of nightmares. And if you, I know this might be another thing that everyone groans at me, but you know, Truth to Power was all about hallucinations. So within the external lore, we've already seen kind of examples of our Guardian being roofied, basically, which is something I talked about in our episode on that one. But like, you know, we have the Vex milk, which causes hallucination. Kabir drank it all. And, well, not all of it, but, you know.
That would be a lot.
That would be a lot of, I'm just going to stop talking down that train of thought. But, you know, we have an element in Destiny already that causes hallucinations and causes those paranoid fears. So it's not, I mean, I'm not going to say the name that Green will throw something at me.
Please don't say it.
But there is a Vex that is, okay, anyways, but there is a psychological component there that's been repeatedly mentioned. So calling out your nightmares, calling out the inner darkness would not be something completely unforeseen, or it's already happened. And I know Myeling wants.
One of the things I wanted to like finish on with the darkness is like, what happens if you do face the true darkness? Like, does Destiny end then? And so it's one of those things that I think about, like, in my mind, as Destiny's going, there needs to always be light and darkness. So I often feel like that we would face maybe minions closer to the darkness, but not necessarily the darkness itself. That's something that I think about a bit as well.
Well, the whole concept is there's darkness and light within all of us. So,
Symmetrist.
You obviously asked a great question. See how we're already arguing? Thank you.
I'll say one last thing on this. Remember what happened in the Black Garden, and remember that the raid is in the Black Garden.
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Moving on. Thank you very much for the question. That was a really good one.
And all of that was all scintillating discussion. I've been stewing in anxiety for the last couple of minutes because I realized I've forgotten a writer.
Oh no!
They're gonna kill me.
Uh-oh.
He's a giant ginger man. Grant Roberts wrote the quest for Luna's Howl, and I wrote the lore tab. But Grant also did the he did the Dawning last year. All the recipes.
Yes.
All
the cookies.
Sorry, Grant. Don't kill me. He's in London. He's the lead writer over at Rocksteady.
Okay.
Good guy.
Awesome. Really quickly, I've just been told off from the side of the stage that we have run over by 10 minutes.
That's it?
Yeah. I know. It's so sad to hear it, but yeah, there's another panel that's literally meant to start here in 3 minutes, and we are currently holding them up. So, I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank everybody who was on this panel.
Yes.
And if you guys have more questions, feel free to seek us out on the show floor. We will be around. But thank you so much for showing up, and thank you for being guardians of this wonderful universe.
Thanks, everyone.